Parts of the country have seen 12 months rain over the last 6 months. Soils are saturated and it's making farming very difficult. It's hard to minimise pugging damage to protect the soil while at the same time not speeding up the grazing rotation too fast and risking running out of pasture next round. At the same time, things like looking after cow comfort, looking after yourself and your staff, and being aware of environmental compliance are all more challenging when this rain keeps on coming. So how are other farmers managing their way through the wet? Today, you'll hear from 3 farmers who have farmed through wet winters before and who will share what they have learned to help you get through the next few weeks of calving. Thanks to John Garrett, Mark Gascoigne and Carl McDonald for joining us on the podcast. This episode is split into 2 parts. I interviewed John and Mark in person here at Newstead and then got Carl on for a video call from his farm up north. John and Carl will speak primarily about things like pugging, soils, feed and round lengths. Mark's a facilitator for Rural Support Trust, so he'll mainly talk about mental health and well-being. Before we get started, just 2 quick notes. Firstly, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Talking Dairy so you get notified when new episodes go live. And secondly, have a look in the show notes for some useful links to DairyNZ's wet weather resources, our well-being section, and to Rural Support Trust. Right, let's get into today's episode. Hey, well, John and Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to come in here. I know you're both very busy at the moment. It's very good of you to join us here on the podcast today. Welcome.
Yep, thank you. Good to be here.
John, firstly, to get things going, tell us a bit about where you're farming and a bit about yourself too. And talk to us about the situation on the farm right now in terms of how wet the soils are, if you have any off-paddock facilities for the stock to go onto, and your feed situation.
Yep, so I'm from the Hauraki Plains, born and bred on Hauraki Plains, so kind of know how that soil works. It's quite heavy clay, pretty hard farming for the Waikato, so it's in the Ngāti area. Running a few farms here at the moment, so 3 farms. Yeah, look, situation at the moment is pretty wet. Like everyone knows, it's been pretty wet, and we're doing a lot of on-off grazing, so it's cows on the paddock for 3 to 4 hours, and then they're off the paddock onto sawdust pads or wood chip pads. That's on all 3 farms. One farm's feeding maize, and they're getting maize before they go onto the grass. Yeah, so pretty much it's about 4 to 5 kilos of maize being fed, and then they're getting fed 6 of grass. Covers are a little bit low, but by feeding this up now, we're trying to still build up cover going into calving. We know we're going to have probably low covers going into calving, but yeah, we're just trying to hold around in these wet conditions. It's a bit of a pain, but yeah, we just got to hold around as long as we can at the 100-day round. So yep, if it gets too wet, we do give them a little bit more area. But if it's a good day, we just tighten back up a bit and squeeze an extra couple of days out of the paddock using supplement to get the extra couple of days.
Yeah, sure. We'll probably get into a bit more of that too as we go along. Mark, what about you?
We're farming at Rotorangi near Cambridge. We're very wet as well, but we're sort of a hilly farm, so the water does run off, but we're pretty heavy clay soils as well, so the hills still get really wet, and even 2 or 3 mils and we're back to square one. So I've been there 30 years. We've got a great contract milker on board. Yeah, I'm busy on the farm as well, but so yeah, there's quite a bit of on-off grazing happening at the moment too. Yeah, we've got a wood chip stand-off pad as well, but it will only hold 150 cows. So yeah, but we also winter milk. We just milk our empties and late calvers. So we've got 10 heifers in now. So we start early, and the cows are sort of 6th of July they start. So yeah, our covers are lower than what we'd like as well. Yeah, we really need the extra cover because we'll be just about almost finished calving by mid-August. So we really need the cover, and it is a worry.
Yeah. John, you've farmed through wet winters before. What are some of the things you've learned from those?
Well, obviously, look after your pastures pretty much. So just simple sort of stuff. Start from the back of the paddock, graze from the back, work way to the front, minimise the damage as much as you can, really. But if it's got a wet paddock, it's real wet, try and avoid it. And you always got dry paddocks on your farm, so go to your dry paddocks. But when it's dry days, try and use those wet paddocks. And probably I've already learnt sometimes having a bit smaller mobs actually works pretty good too. So you got this, instead of having a mob of say 300 or 400 cows, over 200 cows, I find they actually do more tramping. So we just make them smaller mobs. So at 130, 150 kind of, even though it's only 50 less than a 200, it actually makes a big difference. And I just find that they just do less tracking. So
what about that? And we're going to get into this a bit more. What about the mental side of things?
Oh yeah, look, it definitely can wear on you a little bit, but everyone's in the same boat. So yeah, look, you always got to be positive about it. And I've got a few staff, and you always see them and be real positive about it. Even though things could be looking pretty shit and that kind of stuff, you just got to, you're the face of the farm, I guess. So you're always positive with your staff, and if you aren't positive to your staff, then your staff aren't going to be positive, and then it's just going to be a down on spec. So always just try and be positive about the things, and but planning ahead as well. Like there's always going to be plan A, B, C, D. So we know we're in a bit of a situation at the moment. We know it's wet. We're using supplement right now to try and get the cows well fed. So just having a plan, if it stays wet, we've got another plan B, So if it's when we're calving and it's going to be real wet, we're probably going to start with a higher feed in the in-shed feeding system. So we're going to start with 4 kilos. So we know the cow's going to get 4 kilos before they even go to the grass. So technically if they go to the grass, they should be only eating, say 6 to 7, 10 kilos tops, but they've had to sit down. So just planning ahead, so we always got a plan. If that doesn't work, well, hey, we've got silage, we've got hay, trying to make sure that we've got a feed source if it keep going wet. But I think it's just planning, really. So
yeah. I think that's really important for the farm, but also for your mental health. If you've got a plan, and the spring rotation plan is a great tool. Yeah, I think it makes you feel better if you've got a plan and stick to it, rather than just flying, not sure what's going to happen. So I'd definitely recommend making plans and consulting. If you've got a farm consultant or a neighbour or a farming mate that you can talk things through and just come up with a plan to get through it.
Yeah, good one. What are some things you touched on it a little bit before, but what are some things you do to minimise pugging and soil damage while still adequately feeding the cows?
Just on-off grazing, really. But like we know, that's what we feed maize as well, so we make sure they get the extra kilos before they go into the paddock. We're actually not even utilising our grass that great because the cows actually trampling it in, So even though they go in a paddock that's 3,500 or thereabouts, they're actually probably trampling in 500 of it, So that's a bit of a pain in the ass. But it's just trying to make sure the staff actually realise it too, So it's a bit of learning for the staff as well, because the staff we have got probably quite a lot of junior staff, and they're not aware of if we make damage now, it's going to be a long 8 weeks ahead, So in a day, if we make damage now, we're not going to get the production in September, and we're not going to get that production for that paddock going forward right through till summer, So it's just monitoring. Like, it might be you go into the cows 2 hours later and just making sure that, if they're already making damage, right, what's the next call can we do? So for me, it might be like, look, we'll put them back on the feed pad with a bale of hay, So we're lucky we actually got feed pads we can use. Some people haven't got the feed pads, but we've got the luxury of using feed pads, and that's our tool, really, is our feed pads to try and get the feed in there. If they're not fully fed, we can just pump in another hay bale or something like that. So knowing where you've, like I said, wet paddocks, that kind of stuff, knowing if you've given a small break, well, shit, who's going to check them there in 3 hours' time? We know that 3 hours, a cow's going to get 8 kilos. That's maintenance. That's what DairyNZ said, pretty much. 3 hours, they get their maintenance. If they chew the paddock in 3 hours, well, they haven't got maintenance, So you need to work out how can you feed them a bit more.
Yeah, good. Mark, anything to add?
Unfortunately, we haven't got feed pads. We've got in-shed feeding, which can help, and probably a reason we calve quite early is just we just feed grass because we're a hilly farm. It's difficult to feed out, especially when it's wet like this. Better to get the cows calved and going through the shed and getting some extra. One thing I'd like to say is that even with all the advice in the world, it's bloody difficult to minimise the pugging and the soil damage, especially conditions like they are at the moment. So sometimes you can have you can do everything right, but your cows are still going to make a bloody mess. So, and a mental health perspective, I'd say just don't beat yourself up about it, because that's probably the worst thing you can do. Is it's going to happen even if you do everything right. Unfortunately,
some things are out of your control, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately,
yeah. John, it would be easy to offer the cows a greater area and speed up the round. How are you managing the feed situation on your farms?
Yeah, well, first of all, we do a weekly plate walk, so we know exactly what our covers are every week. We use a spring rotation planner, so obviously we're on a 100-day round now, or around 90 to 100-day round. So start calving 1st of July, we'll be on 90-day there, and we'll just use that spring rotation planner. So most of you guys will know what spring rotation planner is about. So, but just keep in line with that, because if we speed up too much, we know that we're going to be in a deficit in the track. But we're also monitoring that with our plate walks every week. So at the moment, we've actually got a dip in about 3 to 4 weeks' time. We see we've actually got deficit. So we know, righto, we can plug in some food in that deficit. But hey, things can change pretty quick. We could have a surplus in there in, say, 5 weeks' time, and then we know we can speed the grid up a little bit more. So 100% you can use both of them together, and it also gives you insurance that you're doing things right, or that you need to change something. So look, if you haven't, definitely it's probably our biggest tool we use, and it also, all the staff knows how it works, so I know, but they also know as well. So best asset for our farm over this period. So
yeah, we're pretty much the same. We work on starter calving being on an 80-day round and down to 20-day round or 25-day round, 10th of September. And it's pretty critical to stick to that. We can see, I do the farm walks, and probably not weekly, but when I can fit it in, but we can see that, there's a bit of a hole in the wedge. Normally we wouldn't be getting any nitrogen on until August, but we'll be into it, in July. I've got Halo that monitors the soil temperature, so as long as it's over 10 degrees, we'll be into it, getting some nitrogen on.
Cool. Do either of you have any rules about minimum cover that you're happy to farm into?
Oh, well, it's probably, you get what you get, but, we're obviously planning this 4 or 6 weeks ago. We were planning our covers, so we obviously dried off earlier and that kind of stuff. So I was predicting a higher growth rate over the May period, and we obviously didn't get that higher growth rate. So hence why we're probably in a bit of a, not deficit, but we're sitting about 100 less than what we would like to be, which is not much, but it still counts at the other end, So the ideal condition to be like last year, how it just kept on growing and it was all good. So it might not be the case this year.
Yeah, I don't know what my minimum is. It doesn't do me much good, my mental health much good if we get too low. I prefer to be 300 or 400 above where I want to be. But it actually, we've had the last couple of summers we've had a drought, and that's been stressful. But it really suits our system on our farm, because following a drought, we have May and June just go berserk. So I think that's what's happened this year, is we've grown grass all summer, and then May and June have just sort of petered out. I don't know what my minimum that I'd be happy with.
Don't want to go there.
Quite funny, because the grass is actually still growing pretty well right now with this warm weather and this rain.
Yeah.
I'm actually seeing growth better than it was last week with the frost. So even though it's wet, we're actually still growing. So it'd be interesting to see what our growth rates are this week. I reckon our farms will grow more this week than we did with those frosty weeks. So
definitely.
As long as it can be wet, but it's still growing, So that's what I'm saying. We've just got to manage those paddocks.
Do you guys find that with mob sizes changing as calving progresses, that some mobs are easier to manage than others?
I think milking mobs are a lot easier to manage than a dry mob. So, your dry mobs, you've got them on a pretty tight feeding ratio. So, your milking mob, once you've got more milkers you got, I think it's a lot easier to manage.
Until you get up to 400 in the milking mob, and it's a wet, miserable day, and it's, But start off with the milkers are the easier mob to manage.
Yeah, sure. Do you find it's better to give more breaks in wet weather to get better utilisation of feed, or are 24-hour breaks working for you for dry cows?
Yeah, well, our 24-hour break wouldn't be on the paddock the whole time at this stage, So we just make our break. If it's wet, make them a little bit bigger. Don't give them 2 breaks, but just make it a little bit bigger. And then we know that they're going to come off in if it's 4 or 5 or 6 hours time. So they're not going to be on the paddock for the whole 24 hours anyway. Then, next day they'll get their next break. So but that's just the Herrick Plains. You can't leave cows on for 24 hours, not this time of the year anyway. So
no, well, we can't do either at the moment, just with how wet it is. Through that dry spell that we had a week ago, we could, but not now, unfortunately.
Sure. Hey, let's shift, talk a bit more about the well-being side of things, because I know that a lot of farmers are struggling at the moment. Mark, you're a facilitator for Rural Support Trust. How long have you been doing that for?
5 or 6 years now, I think. Yeah,
cool. Tell me your main messages for farmers who are, doing it tough right now.
Well, I probably could tell you what I went through, and this is exactly that really stresses me out, a wet winter and wet calving. And it was 7 years ago that I had a bit of a meltdown, to be honest. I just got in a vicious circle of I'd go to bed at night, 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'd be dead tired and I'd go straight to sleep. But I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning every bloody night. Or if it was raining, I'd wake up, and as soon as it would start raining, I'd wake up and I'd listen to it all night, and I'd be awake till my alarm would go at 4:45, and I'd have to get out there and deal with it. And it was just bloody awful. So I was mentally and physically exhausted. Eventually, when I decided I needed to do something about it, unfortunately, I didn't know about the Rural Support Trust at that stage. Well, I went to see my GP and did get put on medication. And actually, one of the medications was an anti-anxiety medication. And luckily, a good thing about it was I'd take it at night and it would knock me out, and I'd sleep all night. And I'd wake up the next morning, go outside. Oh, it's rained during the night, but I could deal with it then. I wasn't bloody lying awake all night thinking, how the hell am I going to get those cows to there? So that was a bit of a circuit breaker for me. I'm not on that medication now. I'm on antidepressants, but not that anxiety one. So, yeah, I'd recommend giving the Rural Support Trust a call if you're really, really struggling. I was. Or when I went to the GP, he didn't tell me about Rural Support Trust, but he did tell me about Farm Strong. That had just been launched about a year prior to that. And he said, have a look at this Farm Strong. And I used the sort of Farm Strong principles. I use them every day now, even 7 years later. So, I'm involved with Farm Strong as an ambassador as well. But that lying awake at night is a real killer. And it still happens to me now. And I've got some strategies that I use to deal with it. I have my phone beside me. And if I'm worried about something specific, I'll sit up and I'll put it on. I've got the reminders list on my phone. I'll just put it on there and just think, okay, tell my brain it's time for sleep now. I'll deal with that in the morning. It's just that act of writing it down helps.
Yep.
Another thing I do is, because what stops you sleeping is just the stress, the worry going round and round in your head. For me, it's like a bloody PowerPoint presentation. My brain's just saying, I'm really pleased you're awake. This is a list of everything that you haven't done.
And let's keep thinking about it all night.
Yeah. So what I do is just try and empty my brain, basically. I'll slow my breathing down and I'll count my breaths, deep breaths, and I start at 30 and I count my way down, 29, 28. And all it's doing is all the stress and going round and round in your head, just getting that out of there. If I find my mind wanders back to what I'm worried about, I'll sort of punish myself, if I can go back to 30 and start again. And, just some strategies like that have helped.
Yeah.
But when I went to the doctor, he did send me to a psychologist, but I didn't find it that helpful because he didn't understand farming. So that's where giving the Rural Support Trust a call, the number's on the website. We know counsellors or psychologists that understand farming and understand the stresses that are involved, or even if it's just talking to someone from the Rural Support Trust, because we understand those stresses. So sometimes it's just a case of talking through what's going on and being able to relate to someone that's been through the same sorts of experiences like I have. That helps. Yeah. So,
do you feel like for you over time, you've sort of developed that toolkit, that skill set to be able to, like you're still working on it, obviously, but do you feel like you're moving in the right direction on that?
Yeah, absolutely. On the Farm Strong website and the Rural Support website, I think there's the 5 Ways to Wellness, which is taken from the Mental Health Foundation. And, I use those 5 ways every day. This morning I was just connecting with people is huge. Like when I was really struggling, I'd get invitations to go to barbecues or parties, and I'd just make excuses and I wouldn't go. So I wasn't connecting with people. I just wanted to sit at home on the couch, feel sorry for myself. But now, like this morning, I've been to the gym with a group of mates, had a workout and had a coffee afterwards and talked a whole lot of bullshit, nothing to do with the farm. And so that's things like that are on the Farm Strong website, connecting and being active as well. This time of year for calving, it's bloody difficult to get all that done, but you've probably got 6 weeks. It's difficult to get that sort of thing, but I think it's still still important to, even if it's, going to Fonterra end of season dinners, or there's lots of squash tournaments on at the moment, things like that, just getting off farm and having a break and talking and having a few beers with mates and just throwing some ideas around and sharing. When I started sharing this sort of stuff and talking about it, I was amazed at how many farmers say exactly the same stuff, oh shit, I lie awake I wake up at 2 o'clock every morning as well. You don't realise it when you're going through it. You think you're the only one, which is bloody stupid.
And has it helped for you knowing that actually it's pretty common?
Absolutely, yeah. And it helps me helping other people. That's part of the reason I do it, because it helps me with my recovery, if you like. Yeah.
What about you, John, in this critical time that we're coming into? How do you de-stress? What are your go-to activities?
Oh, well, I guess play a bit of sport. So I'm playing hockey every Monday night for the last 6 weeks, and that goes through to calving, so still do that. Part of the local rugby club, we're actually, I get involved with the community a little bit, so I think that's it's quite good because it's away from the farm as well, and I guess our hockey team and rugby team, we're all sort of farmers there as well, so we can relate to each other and talk about the good and the bad that's happened on the farm. Also, we've got a messaging group with a bunch of farmers as well, and we're actually on that quite regularly, like every day pretty much. If it's a video of something that's one of the farmers or one of our friends are stuffed up, makes you feel a bit better because you're actually all right. But then, also if you're stuffed up and you send it on there, they actually laugh about it too, so it goes both ways. So I think that's quite good too. And I guess Nikki, my wife as well, she probably hears a lot of it too, but she's a good listener. So, when you come home and, things have hit the fan a little bit, you just talk to her and pretty much tells me to harden up and, not really, but, she's just someone who would listen and, so. But, all those people involved, I guess, you got to have people involved, really. Like I said, you can't really, focus on if there's something stuffed up on the farm where you don't just dwell on it, you got to, move on or, see another picture of it or, talk to a mate and that kind of stuff. If you don't get out there, it's going to be hard if you're just doing the same thing day in, day out. That's where the struggles will be, so.
One tool I use quite regularly is what I call my delete button in my head, because when you do stuff up or something goes wrong or one of your staff or one of your colleagues says something to you that annoys you, if you're not careful, you can get into that negative sort of mindset and it just keeps going round and round in your head, especially if you're doing a job that you don't have to think too much about, like if you're milking. But now what I do is, when something, usually 90% of that sort of stuff is just rubbish. It doesn't really matter. And I'll quickly analyse that negative thought as soon as it comes in, and if it's not worth worrying about, which is usually not worth worrying about, I'll think delete it. Just delete just forget about it. Takes a bit of practice, but I can honestly say that 2 minutes later I wouldn't be able to tell you what it was that annoyed me.
That's cool. Yeah, I like it.
Use the delete button.
You guys got any advice on looking after the team, keeping the team well? So not just you yourself, but the guys working for you.
Yeah, well, they're your asset, really. So I haven't got a team, I haven't got a farming business. So, look, always be positive. Like I said earlier, just always be positive about it, even if something's gone wrong, and you have to have sometimes those discussions, but I always tell my guys, it's a new day, next day, we move on, we learn from it, we move on, So if we do the same mistake 3 or 4 times, then that's a bit frustrating, but discussion, move on. Like during calving, just bring in food and, make sure we've got hot food there and they've always got access to good, healthy food, that kind of stuff. Regular time off, as much as it's getting, farmers are getting more time off, or farm workers are, but it's actually important, because they need to be refreshed as well, So we're on quite regular time off now, even over calving. Before the old time used to be, you do 6 weeks and do it straight, and those days are long gone. And so we're actually probably overstaffed at the moment because we've got full-time staff that will cover the farms, So one of my staff member or 2 of them actually will run between the 3 farms, and they'll be just covering so they sort of know what the system is and that kind of stuff. And so, look, costs my business a little bit more, but it means that I've actually got everything in-house now. I'm not looking for relief staff, and I'm not worried about who's going to milk on the weekend because someone's got the weekend off. It's just everyone's in-house. And, it means that some days we've got too many staff on, but, that's when I can actually pull back a little bit and go, right, you guys have got this sorted. I don't have to be here and that kind of stuff. So, but like I said, you just got to look after them because they're your asset, and if you haven't got them, they should be number one on the farm, really. So, the cows come second, they come first, really. So, like I said, I haven't got a business without them.
I'd add that just sometimes you have days that anything that can go wrong does go wrong, And it's so important not to lash out at staff or partners, or it's really a case of biting your tongue and just waiting, just a few deep breaths and waiting 5 minutes before you decide how to react to something. I mean, it's hard, but if you're really stressed, like John said, just trying to keep positive, especially around staff, and try and have a laugh. It's really important to try and keep that sense of humour going.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey, just a final question for you both. We have to wrap up because we're going to cut to Carl in Northland in a second, so we don't want the podcast to get too long. But have you got an easy win? Just your recommendations for an easy win that farmers can implement to improve things to make life easier for animals and the team?
Keep talking. Don't sort of clam up. Keep talking to your consultant or your neighbour or your mate, or if you're a contract milker, keep that line of communication going with farm owners. And it can be a problem shared as a problem halved. It's quite often in that situation the farm owner's been there for many years, and if you ask about how you'd approach grazing a certain paddock, or it's quite often they'll have ideas. Yeah. So keep communicating.
Good one.
Yeah, I was going to say too. Communication, it's key. But that's communication with everyone, your staff, the farm owners, your wife or husband, whatever. Just communication and just planning, And then, if you plan and communication, it should be, hey, we'll get through it easy as. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, really. So, and summer's only 4 months away, so it's pretty good. So
yeah, that's the thing. It feels like when you're here, the end of calving looks like a long way away, but it's going to go really fast. Yep. That's the other thing and celebrate. Like the sun's shining today, so you've got to really take notice of that and celebrate it, as well as, the wet weather is bloody horrible, but you've also got to celebrate when the good weather comes as well.
Yeah.
And enjoy it.
Good reminder. Good reminder. Guys, thanks so much. I feel like it was short and snappy and we could probably yarn for another hour quite easily, but thank you very, very much for coming in today and sharing some of your thoughts with our audience.
That's sweet as.
Cool.
Hey, well, Carl, I've just come off an interview with John and Mark, and we had a really good conversation, not just about wet weather management, but also about the mental health side of things. And I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation with you along the same lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, so tell us a little bit about where you're farming, what your situation is on the farm right now in terms of how wet the soils are, if you have any off-paddock facilities to stand off the cows, and what's your feed situation?
So we are Northland, just north of Whangarei, right beside the Brynduin Hills. So it's like a big rain attractor. A very wet farm, clay and river silt. We have no dedicated standoff facilities as such, although we have a 400 cowshed yard, and we have the old cowshed, which when I first got here, we did some work to that cow yard so that we could use it to stand cows off. We can stand about 150 cows off in that old yard. We got the effluent system going over there, and it still has effluent system attached and pumps and everything. We just got it all going, and we do have a couple of hill paddocks here which are not really dairy cow paddocks, and they will be used as sacrifice paddocks, if things get real bad. We're just trying to not use all our eggs that we have in our basket straight away. The soil is saturated. That's like we get 5 mils of rain and the creeks are up. The soils are full of water. We are struggling in terms of finding a dry bit of ground to put cows at the moment. It's tough, especially so I'm new to this farm, started here on the 1st of June, a new 50-50 share milker on this farm, and came from a sandy loam farm where it doesn't matter how much rain you get, it never gets wet. So that was like a big sea change. But I have farmed on wet farms before, so been there, done that, but not for a few years. So, yeah, just bringing back the old skills in terms of managing some wet soil types.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. You've been through this before. What lessons have you learned?
Number one is we need to absolutely limit the damage that we do to pasture. And I mean that in terms of for the rest of the season, because the damage that we do now affects those paddocks for the entire rest of the season. Unless you spend money and do a lot of work, those paddocks are damaged. And, I'd be guessing that in some badly damaged paddocks, you'd be 50% down on dry matter production in some of those paddocks. Look, I accept that, particularly this farm, we have limited facilities and we have very wet soil types. We are never going to do zero damage. So for us, it's all about limiting that damage as much as we can, and knowing that any damage we do now is going to be reflected in the amount of pasture that we can produce later on. What I've learned is just maybe a little bit more better time management, making sure that we can get back to those really important jobs, like getting those cows off the paddock on time every time. It's a difficult situation because we know that we're going to do the damage to paddocks. We're going to do some damage, and we have to not beat ourselves up about that. We have, because I've got staff, it's hard on staff too, making, staff doing this stuff. I remember when I was a manager and a farm assistant and stuff, doing this for cows, and it's tough, even when you're not financially invested in the job as such. It's still hard on people doing that, out in the mud and the rain every day and chasing cows around paddocks that are muddy. And the trick is for us is, let's not beat ourselves up over it. And what we need to do is just make sure that the cows are okay, we're okay, and we do the best we can with our pastures.
How are you managing round lengths at the moment?
So we're still hanging on to a 100-day round right now by the skin of our teeth. And there are days when that blows out. Like 2 days ago, I got up in the morning and let the cows into the paddock, and we did some jobs, went home for breakfast, looked up, and they'd stolen the next day's break, and that sort of things happens too. But so we came to a bit of a situation on the farm where there was not much in the way of pasture on the farm. Average pasture cover when we got here on the 1st of June was under 2,000 kilos of dry matter to the hectare, and it really needed to be 2,300 plus. And so the only way we were going to fix that was we got some nitrogen on and let's get just bang straight out to a 100-day rotation. So, our spring rotation planner says we should be at like 65 or something, but we're trying to really bang that out to 100 right now, because that's the only way we're going to build pasture in front of us. Feed our supplement, keep our round length right out there, let that nitrogen do its work. It's hard trying to keep a rotation right now, 100-day rotation right now. I've got 400 cows supposed to get 1.7 hectares or something. Yeah, so maybe we're not quite at 100, but we'd be at 90 plus.
Are there any other strategies that you're using to get through this time, Carl?
I try and take it one day at a time with a plan for the next day. And let's not get too carried away, because who knows what's going to happen. We could get 100 mils tomorrow and the plans that we have are gone. We just have to find a new plan. So I try not to get too carried away in terms of long-term plans, in terms of where our cows are grazing and what we're doing. We have some supplement on hand, and I was lucky enough to have 120-odd bales of silage and hay from a block that I had that I bought to this farm when I came here. So that was, fortunate, gave us the ability to keep our 100-day round. We're going to buy some palm kernel, and I've organised, if there's a few little places on the farm that, I can walk the cows past there, put 2 6-metre palm kernel trailers there, and they'll get a kilo on the way to the paddock. And just a few little tweaks that we can do to, get something else into the cows and not eat our grass that we have got.
Yeah. What are you doing to keep yourself in a good mindset, Carl?
It's funny because I always believed that I never suffered from stress, and I found I was quite wrong about that, actually. And it was funny because I was at a farm source store and I was waiting to be served. The two people there were busy, and there was a little pamphlet there about this Farm Strong. It was got Sam Whitelock, and these guys were talking about stress and all that. And I was reading this pamphlet, and I read about it, and while I was waiting to be served, and a few days later I had some big jobs on, like moving farms, like 400 cows to move and all the stuff that goes with it, as well as a household and stuff. And I was like struggling to think what I was going to do next. I was like, mate, what do I do now? What do I do now? And then I was just like, bang, shit, I remembered that bloody pamphlet said, one of the signs of stress is you can't think what you're going to do. And I was like, whoa, maybe I do suffer from stress. And so I was just like, okay, snap that out of that. I just like, okay, that's a job. Let's just go and do it. Go and do that job. I went and did that job, and everything else just fell into place for the day. And so one of the things is that, for myself, I never recognised that I suffered from stress, and maybe I do. But one thing I try and do with, like, for my staff is we'll get together every day and have a chat in the morning about our day, and, have a bit of a laugh and a joke. And once a week we'll get together at the end of the day. We might have a beer or even just a coffee and a feed, like I'll put on something for dinner. And it's amazing what just those little things like that can just, lift the mood, I guess, and set you up for a whole week of sitting around in the mud.
Hey, do you have a bit of a support network around you? Do you have some people you go to when you need to have a yarn apart from your team?
So I have my partner, Shannon, and my kids, great stress relief, 3 little kids running around, and they cause havoc. It's great fun. But I also have a very supportive farm owner here, Lockie. He's just amazing. He's been on this farm his whole life, so knows the farm inside out. And so I talk to him quite a lot about what's going on and just running my ideas past him. And he's always very supportive of what I want to do, and he comes and helps too, like washes our yard on the other standoff yard and things like that for me, so which is great. Talk to him quite a lot, and I have a couple of other farming friends that, both share milkers that I ring and talk to about different things we're doing and what's going on. And, it's kind of a reciprocal arrangement. They can ring and moan to me, and I can ring and moan to them. It's quite good just to know when you're not the only one floundering around in the mud too, Misery loves company is a good saying, I guess. But it's like, seriously, it is good to just talk to people about, like I rang my mate Archie up the other day, and he was like, "Mate, are you sick of this bloody rain?" I was like, "Mate, I'm sick of the rain." And he's like, yeah, it's pretty bloody wet. He's on a very wet farm too. And even just those words,
Yeah, good on you, Cal. Hey, mate, just to finish up, sorry to put you on the spot, but what's like one piece of advice or, word of encouragement or something you just give to other farmers out there who are in the same spot and battling?
You just take it one day at a time, do your best, and accept that you're not going to be 100% perfect. You're never going to get it 100% right, and don't beat yourself up over it. Do the best you can with the resources you have, use the resources that you have available, and don't limit yourself to the methods that be open to having a crack at something else. But you don't beat yourself up over it. The rain will stop.
Good on you, Carl. Hey, thanks, mate. It's awesome of you to join us on the podcast and give up your time.
No problem.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode, and I just want to say a quick thank you to all of you who listen and subscribe to this podcast, both here in New Zealand and overseas. At DairyNZ, we're really grateful for your support, your feedback, and your new ideas for podcasts. And on that note, please don't be shy to drop me a line if you have any fresh ideas at talkingdairy@dairynz.co.nz. Catch you next time.